Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's session. I am your session moderator, Kendra Lake. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. First, we ask that you keep your microphone on mute until it is time to ask questions. You can ask questions at any time by answering them in the chat panel, and we will address them at the end of the session. Second, just a reminder that we are recording today's session. And last, closed caption is available throughout the session today. And today our presentation is Introducing Quiz Exchange, a collaborative authoring tool to create free textbook agnostic test banks. Our presenters are Alexis Duffy and Ashley Miller. So without further ado, handing it over to you, ladies.
Great, thank you, Kendra. All right, let's go on in here. All right, so Kendra gave us a great introduction with the title, of course, Introducing Quiz Exchange. I am Alexis Duffy. I'm the project coordinator for the Affordable Learning Exchange here at Ohio State. And go ahead, Ashley.
I'm Ashley Miller, Associate Director of Affordability and Access in the Office of Distance Education and E-Learning at Ohio State. Oh yeah, this is my slide. So yes, I manage the Affordable Learning Exchange. So let me tell you a little bit about that. The Affordable Learning Exchange started as a grant program. Our first cohort was in 2016. And since then we have diversified, and our mission is to deliver affordable content models at Ohio State at scale. Next slide, please. Everybody here knows this, but I just give this as sort of foundational information, which is, why are we here? Why do we do this work? And this graphic, I think, sort of illustrates that well, which is that students have a cost of attendance that is higher than what they get in financial aid. And so there is a gap. For students who receive financial aid, the gap is even larger, potentially for students who don't. But they tend to have to pay for tuition and fees. They have to pay for a place to live and for food. And discretionary spending is the category that most everything else falls into. And course materials tend to fall into that category. So along with things like maybe going out, entertainment, things like that. That's what we hear from students, that they think of textbooks as sort of optional. Next slide, please. So this plays out at Ohio State in this way, which you're looking at a lecture hall with 700 seats. So this is a macroeconomics class. This professor moved to an open textbook from a conventional publisher textbook, and that textbook was $200. And so this is about a $200,000 a semester savings just in this one class. So this is the kind of scale that we deal with when we talk about savings at Ohio State. Next slide. So I mentioned that we started as a grant program, and we've diversified our various ways of helping save money on those course materials. So we have a mixed ecosystem of solutions. The first and probably still biggest effort under this Affordable Learning Exchange banner is our grants program. We have completed 7 cohorts now. 121 faculty have won grants from us, and we have achieved $14 million in savings since the inception of that program in 2016. We also do inclusive access under the Affordable Learning Exchange. We call that Carmen Books. And we have been doing that just since we piloted in 2018, but we only went wide with that in 2019. And we've already gotten to $12 million in savings there. We focus just on discounts on publisher course materials or courseware for that program. And then we also do some work with faculty collaboration, and this is where Quiz Exchange falls. So Quiz Exchange employs a collaboration model called Content Camp, which I believe Alexis is going to talk about just on the next slide. So I don't want to talk too much about that yet, other than to say that we started doing that model with Quiz Exchange, and we have also used that recently on a large scale project over the course of the past couple years to create and curate affordable course materials and open course materials for a lot of the shared GE courses that share transfer assurance guidelines across the state of Ohio. And that project was called the Ohio Open Ed Collaborative, if you want to check that out. So I will now turn it over to Alexis, and she'll talk more about Content Camp.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I had to unmute there for a second. So Ashley talked a lot about the work we do. We do a lot of varied types of work. And what I have done in the past is I've done a lot of work with the grants project. So what that means is that I am working with a lot of instructors one-on-one to help them move from conventionally published textbooks and into the affordable or open textbook space as well. So what that means is that they're dropping the textbook, but they're also dropping everything that comes along with it. So they're losing a lot of ancillary materials. And when I say that, I mean things like lecture notes, I mean PowerPoints, and we're going to talk today a lot about test banks. So this became really apparent for us with one course in particular. In fact, that picture of the classroom that Ashley showed when she was talking, that really giant big picture, that was Principles of Macroeconomics, she said, taught by Darcy Hartman. And that class seats 500-600 students every semester. And when Darcy Hartman is using a conventionally published textbook, she's also using that test bank, and she's using that for a lot of reasons. In Darcy's case, she was using it for reading checks inside of her learning management system. So making sure that students were engaging with the textbook, learning the material outside of class. And she also needed to use that so that she could benefit from the automatic grading that comes with your learning management system. That's just some reasons. Other instructors like to use test banks for things like the testing effect, which says that the more often students are accessing their retrieval, so the more often they're quizzed to go back into their brain and use that information, the better they retain it, the better that they learn it. So anyway, as we learned that this was going to be a really big struggle for Darcy to lose these test banks along with her textbook, we were trying to figure out how best to do this. We knew she couldn't write a test bank on her own. I mean, with that many courses over the course of a year, that would mean, every test bank is at least 1,000 questions. So she'd have to write so many. She'd have to vary them so that she could, vary the questions she uses between classes. And that's not really a realistic ask. So we had to think about some different approaches. So we decided to take a look at, to start a new process we call collaborative authoring, and we used Content Camp to do this. So we put together a content team. We started with macroeconomics content team, and together they were going to collaboratively author a free textbook agnostic test bank for the course that they taught. So in this case, it was Principles of Macroeconomics. So we put together content teams made up of instructors from all sorts of institutions. So this includes community colleges, 2-year, Research One universities like Ohio State, Michigan State, all different types of instructors from different universities. And then we created a team that was led by one team lead and then content contributors. And everybody on the team received a stipend for their work. Before camp got started, we started doing some organizational work to set up what we call an organizational hierarchy that the instructors would use to author questions to during and after camp. So the idea of this is that it's meant to cover all the content that might be taught in a course on principal economics. So it's a list of the content and how it might be taught. It's also meant to serve as sort of a map. So once the bank is completed, other instructors can come into the bank and sort of intuitively know where to find what they want, because they are really, really intimately familiar with the content of the course and how it's taught and how it's typically organized. And this means that you can pair it with any learning material that you're using, whether it's a conventional textbook or an open textbook or a series of readings that you've pulled from various places like your library or things like that. So to get started, we asked the teams to review tables of contents that they might see in a typical macroeconomics textbook so that they can sort of see typical organizations and make sure that they're not leaving out anything that would be important for another practitioner in their field. So once we got going on that, we gathered the team together for a 2-day event at the Big Ten Center in Chicago. So that's where they are in this picture. This is Darcy here in the white blouse, and this is the macroeconomics team. They were having great fun, as you can tell. So then we start, I already talked about how we started the cycle with this defining of the organizational structure of the content, but then we moved into some work at Content Camp itself in person. So we still fine-tuned and tweaked that organizational content, but we moved quickly into some professional development on question authoring. So when we talked about question authoring, the goal here is to make sure that all instructors are approaching question authoring with the same set of guidelines and a framework so that when we start to author, we're getting a more consistent product out of a group of instructors who might not necessarily come with the same set of assumptions to the authoring process. And after we went through that professional development, we did some team training on Quiz Exchange. So how to use it, how to write, how to review inside of it, how to browse, basic tech training sort of things. And then we move on to the authoring and peer review parts of the process. We did a lot of this at camp together to practice, the different processes, but Content Camp, while it's an event, it's also a process that extends after camp. So there's several months that they worked remotely, both authoring the questions and then reviewing the questions. It takes a lot of time. We ask them to write 200 questions, and those numbers can, be a little bit different depending on the camp and how big the team is, but it's usually at least write 200 and review 200. The goal is at the end of this process, they're going to have a test bank that has at least 1,000 questions. And theoretically, every question should have been written by and reviewed by a subject matter expert, and not just a subject matter expert, but an actual instructor who's teaching the content in their course. So that's Content Camp. And I'm going to let Ashley give you an idea of the question authoring development that we talked about.
Thanks. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. I'm going to just talk about a couple of them, but basically we just gave them a list of pretty basic, framework of guidelines for how to author assessment items. And so, for example, on this screen, I'll talk about number 4, which is to avoid referencing unqualified opinions. That's not good practice when creating your test question. Number 5 is to avoid trick items that intentionally mislead students. So the idea here is that you don't want to waste anyone's time, and you want to test them on their knowledge of the content, not their ability to not be tricked by the way that you word a question. Next slide. And then style also plays a part. So I'll pick out number 3 here on this slide. You want to keep vocabulary and linguistic complexity appropriate for the target population for your audience. So just as you would with any other course materials, you want to, use appropriate language and construct your question appropriately for the test taker. Next slide. On this one, we can talk about the second one here, which is to word that STEM positively instead of using negative phrasing. So instead of saying, something is not something, and then the answer that you're looking for being an affirmation of that negative, you would just, ask that positively, because this, again, kind of like the wording in a trick question, can be confusing. And if they're not reading it carefully, they can make a mistake that really doesn't have to do with whether or not they know the content. Next slide. And then here's a lot on 13, and these are about the response options that you offer. So everything we talked about up to this point was about writing the STEM. And then some similar rules apply to your response options. The first one, which I think is maybe the most important one here, and was news to me, was that 3 options are usually sufficient. There's been research here, and generally speaking, if you're adding a 4th option, it tends to be kind of a throwaway. And so, again, back to the point of not wanting to waste anybody's time, try to see if you can do it with just having 3 options for the test taker. Number 2, avoid blatantly ridiculous options as your potential response options. This is a waste of everybody's time, and you're not testing their knowledge of the content. So unless you occasionally want to just have a laugh with your students, there's no real need to offer anything that's obviously incorrect. And then number 5, again, is in the response options. You also want to avoid negative phrasing of those options, again, because it can just be confusing for the test taker. Next slide. And here we are with, I think Alexis now is going to do a tour of QuizXchange.
Let's get into it. Great. So all of that work that we've talked about in terms of the process of Content Camp, that is all supported by QuizXchange. And here's what it looks like, and we're going to get into it. And you can use QuizXchange to build, to browse, of course, to build a quiz, download that quiz, and then upload it into your LMS. You could download a QTI file and then upload that into your LMS and use that to quiz your students. We collaborated with Penn State on the development of QuizXchange, and also with the Big Ten Academic Alliance on the Content Camp events. Great. So I am going to take us to QuizXchange. Can you all see that? Great. Okay. So this is the login screen here. This is going to change a little bit. So this is sort of already being phased out. But what I want to talk about here is that we are working with Shibboleth and InCommon, which many of our institutions have this relationship, so that many of them can sign in with Shibboleth with your institutional sign-on. So it's just I sign in with my Ohio State credentials. You can also, if you're not part of InCommon, you can also sign on, make an account with Google or Microsoft. We do ask that you validate that account with a EDU account after that fact, just because we want to keep it within the academic community. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in and see it's just using all my Ohio State stuff. So this is going to be more than you're going to see because I'm administrator, but here is everything. So you can see here, we have all the disciplines that we have in QuizXchange. You can see all the questions listed. The number of questions, I should say. On the left, we have some other navigational options. You can use these menus to drill down into the discipline that you're interested in. And then at the top, this little, should be pretty familiar looking, this little magnifying glass will help you search. So if you want to write a question on, I don't know, GDP, then you could type GDP here, and then any question that talks about GDP will show up. Instead of drilling down, you can find what you want pretty easily. This is just in case I have any notifications. We'll take a look at that later. And this is the cart experience, and we're going to talk about that later. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's continue with our economics trend for now. So let's go into economics. So this is the discipline, and here we have the courses. So there can be more than one course, of course, in any discipline. So let's talk about macroeconomics because that's where we have started. And then subjects. So as you're drilling down, you can think of this sort of as a table of contents that you might see in a book. And this is the work that those content teams did before and during Content Camp. They designed this hierarchical system to help other instructors know how to find content. So subjects is what we have at the next level. And then we're going to go into GDP. And then here, topics. These are the topics. There's 3 topics under GDP, and this is the most granular level of content other than a question. This is what the questions are written to. You can sort of think of this as a learning objective. In fact, that's how we started talking about these topics. But in terms of ease of use, learning objective wasn't exactly what we wanted. So we went with topics, and that's what these are. Total output as measured by the expenditure and income approaches. Okay, so now we have our list of questions. So if you want to just quickly do a search for something particular inside of this topic, you can do that. You can also, sorry, there's might be some back noise in my background. I apologize. You can sort by review status. So as I mentioned early on in Content Camp, these questions are reviewed also. And so if you only want questions that have been reviewed and have been given the thumbs up, you can sort by those questions. You can also sort by type of question and depth of knowledge, which I'll talk a little bit more later, but it just lets you know it's a framework to decide difficulty level of a question. So let's expand all. And so here are the questions. So this is the question stem. Ashley mentioned question stem earlier. Question stem, the answers. The correct answer, of course, shows that green check mark. And then if you like the question, you add it to the cart, or you can like it or save it for later. It shows the metadata here will show you usage statistics. So number of times that this question has been downloaded, when it was created, who created it, who reviewed it, and what that review status is. So let's go. And let me look for which of the following. Here we go. This is really neat too, because it shows the history of a question in terms of its review. So this question, you'll see it has question history, which means there are 3 changes here. So we can expand that menu, and it shows that on December 4th, the reviewer made a recommendation to the original author saying that they think they had typed something incorrectly in one of the answer options. And then the original author made some changes, and we can see those changes here. And then you can see that it was then approved. It was reviewed again by that original reviewer, and it was approved. So now that we know that this question, we know what type of review process this question has gone through. And if you have credentials to do this, if you're inside this content team, you can leave a comment here. And you can say, if you feel that, there's an error or something like that. If a question is new, you can also leave feedback, which has to do formally with that review process. So I'm not going to leave a comment. Okay, so if we like all these questions, let's say we want to make up a quiz for GDP. So I'm just going to go ahead and add all the questions I like to my quiz. There we go. And now you can see the number in my cart has climbed. So let's go take a look at my cart. And here it shows me what's inside here. So it tells me what topics and of course what discipline and subject and things I'm in. I can review all the questions here and make sure that they are the ones I wanted to add. If I decide I don't like it, I can just take it away like this, or I can use the save for later button. If it doesn't exactly fit, but I do like it, I can save it and it will go into my my dashboard. And then when I'm ready to download it, I should name it. I want to say that I want to indicate to myself what is in this quiz, right? So any quiz that you download will be saved into your account in your dashboard, but what you won't be able to do is review the questions that are in there or see the questions. So you want to make sure when you're naming it to give yourself a clue to see what that content is. So let's call this GDP Unit 4 in my faux Unit 4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this. And then we have a zip file here that I can then upload into Canvas, which is our LMS at Ohio State. So that is the quiz building process, but let's go ahead and build and write a question together. So I could choose if I wanted to write a economics question, I could just add a question here, and all of this organizational information, all those tags that let you know where the question is and what the discipline and topic are, that would automatically be added. But if I wanted to create a new question, it knew what I was going to do. We'll go ahead and do it. So it's I can add a topic from here. So let's do something different. Let's go to psychology. And then we'll do the intro to psychology because that's the course that we have inside. And then for the subject, we will do memory. And for our topic, we will do 3 processes of memory. And I just need to add that to make sure that my question goes in the right spot. You can also associate a question with more than one topic if it fits. This happened a lot in economics, actually. Things were appropriate for both an intro to micro and an intro to macroeconomics. So sometimes we associated questions with more than one topic. And here are the question types that you're able to do. For those of you that are using Canvas, this is meant to mimic the Canvas experience, the quiz authoring experience. So all these question types are available to write. For essay, there is no, while the essay question will port over via your zip file, it will not bring an answer because that needs to be graded. An essay question, of course, needs to be graded by an instructor. What you can do is leave an author's note here at the bottom to let a user in the system know what you were thinking of, excuse me, in terms of an answer. Let me just take a drink of water here. All right, so we like a multiple choice question. You'll see here we have a rich text editor. You can do all types of formatting, links. You can add pictures. We ask that you only upload pictures, and you have to, by adding a picture, you're acknowledging that this image is either original work that you're happy to share or is a Creative Commons licensed image, so that we're doing our best to ensure that content is all free to share and to spread amongst your community. Okay, so let's go ahead and write a question. According to the puppet, Kermit the Frog, which of the following is one process of memory? Okay, so for my answers here, I'm going to go with, first, we'll do the right answer first. And I'm going to indicate that this is the right answer. Let's see, what's some other episodic memory? That's cool. It's in the realm, but it's not correct. Memory traces or engrams. I used an open textbook to help me populate this properly. But man, that 4th option is hard. I'm not quite sure what to type. Let's see if this will be a good 4th option. Great. And then you can shuffle your answers so that you're not doing always C or always A or whatever. And then for depth of knowledge, I mentioned that this is a way to indicate the level of difficulty. This is based on Webb's depth of knowledge. Here we can show this. I found this using the Creative Commons search, don't worry. And it has to do with, it's just a new way of categorizing the Bloom's taxonomy. So the first level is recall, and then skill and concept, strategic thinking, and extended thinking. So it just sort of indicates to the person browsing how difficult the question is and what types of learning objectives it might be getting at. So I'm happy with my question. I'm going to go ahead and add it. And it says question created. So now if I go to this course, if we go back into psychology and intro to psychology, we're going to drill all the way back down. I'm sorry, memory, 3 processes of memory. And because it's the most recent, it'll be all the way at the bottom. There it is. I wrote it. Here's the day, and it's awaiting review. So what do you guys think about my question?
So I think I'll take over here. I'm going to just, I will leave the feedback for the group. So why don't I, give me just 1 second here. I'm sorry, I accidentally closed my tab, but let me navigate to your question here, and we'll talk through together what we think about Alexis's question based on some of the things that you saw me talk about. Okay, I'm there and I'm ready to leave feedback. Does anyone have feedback for us, for Alexis? No one has feedback?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
You have a fourth answer that you probably don't need, especially because you had a hard time coming up with it, but it's like humorous. It's kind of an obvious incorrect choice.
Okay, I said you don't need a fourth option. That's also not a good option as it's obviously incorrect. Any other observations about Alexis's questionable question? I have one thought. I don't think, now I could be wrong, but my memory of Kermit the Frog specifically and Muppets in general is that I don't think of them as being experts in memory or psychology in any way. Would everyone agree with me on that? So I think we're not following that rule of only sticking to referring to people with expertise here. So I'm going to add that to my feedback to Alexis. I also don't think Kermit is a good reference point for this topic. Okay, so I've left feedback. I'm going to hit submit and we'll see what happens next.
Okay, I have a notification right up here in my little bell. Let's check it out. Okay, scroll all the way up here, y'all. Uh-oh. Okay. Nope. Here we go. Here it is. According to here we go. Let's take a look at it. So now I have this little icon here in my history, and it says that this question needs revision. Oh boy. Okay. So it looks like Ashley Miller has left me some valuable feedback. So I can go in and I can edit my question. And I can say, oh boy, I think Ashley was right. You know, I don't think Rainbow Connection is a very good distractor. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then she's right. I don't know what I was thinking about Kermit the Frog, but if I can just say which of the following is one process of memory, then my question, I think, is right. So I would go in and I would update it. And that question would be available for review again for someone to go in and say that that question is right. And I think in Ashley's screen, it would notify her that I had audited a question that she had left some feedback on, so that she has a chance to go in. It pings her again to go see what I've done and to see if I've done a good job of fixing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the same way, I get a notification and I see that you revised the question. I'm just going to view it. And at this point, I can leave more feedback, or I can say, yep, looks good. So that's what I chose. And now the question shows, you know, the green check mark, and it's kind of been given the stamp of approval that it's good to go.
Yep. It shows that it has been reviewed. And then you can still see all of this revision history that we just did together in that individual question. Great. All right, let's get out of Content Camp here for a second. Not Content Camp, Quiz Exchange. And we'll go back into our little PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to tell you now how you can get involved with this work, and you can start to use Quiz Exchange if you want. As we showed you, you can sign up for a Quiz Exchange account. The accounts are free. The questions are free. We encourage you to go in and to use them in your courses to assess the knowledge in your course. It's quizexchange.osu.edu. Make an account with either Shibboleth, and you are going to see a new login screen here pretty soon, but it should still be a pretty easy process. Or you can validate a Microsoft or Google account with a .edu address. Eventually, this isn't possible quite yet, but eventually you're going to be able to upgrade your account as a content expert. We're going to validate, not anybody that says that they're a content expert is going to have, we're going to validate that manually to make sure that you really are an expert in psychology and that you're not Kermit the Frog, so that you are considered a subject matter expert who's leaving good feedback and adding good questions. So once you do that, you can contribute to the content in there. And then if you are interested in forming your own subject team because your discipline wasn't represented in Quiz Exchange and you're interested in doing that yourself, talk to us. I'm going to give you our contact information on the next slide, and we'd love to talk to you more. I think we're looking at maybe the spring. Is that right, Ashley, for looking at our next roll of content camps? So yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and let me just hop in. I saw Susan's comments. This happened to another user recently, and I think there's a bug. So it looks like Shibboleth. I know there are some changes that are coming to production on the Shibboleth sign-in that are going to potentially fix this issue. So I apologize that it took you to the OSU sign-on. However, if you sign up with either your Google or Microsoft, okay, Google, yeah, try that, and then what we'll see you in the system, and you'll basically go to a screen where you can tell us what your edu email address is, and then we'll activate your account manually instead of having you be verified using InCommon or the other options there. So apologize for that technology blip, which seems to be happening right at the moment. So yeah, if anybody here wants to sign up right now, I would say I think Google is the one to choose. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that, we only promote you to an author/editor role if you are an expert in that field. So, requests to be promoted to an author role will be received by us, and we're going to manually process those and try to do some verification. The reason for that is obviously we don't want anyone in there who's able to write or review questions who doesn't have expertise. And the only thing that you can do with Quiz Exchange right now, because we're still working on some like end user license agreements, is to download, to search, browse, find questions you like and download and use them freely. But there's nobody actually doing any contributing at the moment because we're still working through that lengthy process with our legal folks to make sure the user agreements are okay for that. So yes, Alexis mentioned spring, and that is our timeline for having sort of the next steps for Quiz Exchange and resuming the process of adding more content to the site. Okay, and I think that's it. And we'd love to hear questions or comments or whatever you got.
I have a comment. I think this is an absolutely wonderful tool that fills a hole that a lot of us have experienced at some of our institutions in trying to advocate for the use of open resources. That's often one of those roadblocks that we hear is the extra stuff or the quiz banks or those types of things. I rely so heavily on those. So I think this is a wonderful service that you guys are developing and providing, and I'm really excited to share it with all the people at my institution. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Feel free to enter them in the chat or unmute yourself, and you're welcome to speak out loud.
I'll speak out loud. This looks like a fantastic resource, and I actually am giving a presentation in 2 weeks. So welcome back Faculty Week presentation, and I'm really excited to be able to address this concern, which has always been on people's minds, the thing they're reluctant. And I like the way you phrased it, the publisher gives them the whole package, and that's what they're reluctant to give up. So I'm really excited. And I really love the idea that you guys are going to do are open to content, subject matter that may not be in there. So, because I have a lot of programs at our school that are niche and different, but CTE kind of things, and but some other. This is exciting. We have some faculty working on case studies, creating, case studies that can be used like by business programs and health professions and things. So it kind of fits in with that idea, and I love it. So I'm really excited to explore what you've got in there.
Thank you. And on that note, if anybody, in those conversations with faculty as you get going this fall, and you start hearing about those needs, it's going to be around the time that we're going to start wanting to figure out, if we are going to add some more content in the spring, where are we hearing, what disciplines are we hearing a lot of interest from? And so, if you have folks, we're open to and in fact want to build these teams of authors from all over to the extent that we can. We have done a few of these content camps virtually, pre-COVID, and they worked well. And I don't see any reason to not do them virtually going forward. So we're not really restricted by, physical location, I think, in the way that we thought we might be at the beginning of this. So we're super excited about getting people together who are teaching the same course from lots of different institutions to kind of get together and have that initial conversation of what is the organization that we, what are the things, the subjects and topics that we all teach that we want to make sure are in here so that we can build that container and then open the floodgates and let everyone in to start contributing. But we want to get those teams together to start building those containers in lots of courses soon.
So I entered my question in the chat, but that was so I wouldn't forget it. So the format that questions download, and if you make your cart and download the quizzes, is that LMS agnostic? Is that something that you mentioned you use Canvas, other institutions obviously use other, I'm not fully ingrained in my campus's LMS, so I don't know all of the details with that.
So a QT, it downloads a zip file, which is really a QTI file. And we know it works well on Canvas, like we said, because we use Canvas. In theory, it works with Blackboard as well. Blackboard ingests QTI files. We've had some problems with it, but one of the things we are working on is also right now we're working to have Quiz Exchange export in a Word document format, just so that you could easily do, put it wherever you want it or even print it, you know what I mean? But we actually have a workaround for that as well, using another tool out of, is it Berkeley, Ashley? Stanford, thank you. That they can ingest your QTI file and create a Google Doc for you. So if that information, we're happy to share that as well.
Yeah, so it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work with Blackboard, D2L, and Canvas. They're supposed to all be able to ingest QTI files. What we're learning is that they do it all a little bit differently. If anybody's familiar with, creating EPUBs and then having to manage how an EPUB reader manages, the file after you create what should be a standard, it's kind of like that. So most of those will also ingest, or you can use a third-party tool to make a formatted Word doc uploadable into most of those LMSs too, including actually ExamSoft will take a QTI or a Word doc as well. So a lot of folks I know at Ohio State use ExamSoft, and I think everywhere. So you might want to check into that as well. Yeah, we haven't had anyone using Moodle try it out, but would welcome that. And Moodle might even, I don't know how it works, but we can turn it into a Google Doc as well, and Moodle might be able to ingest that, depending. I'm not familiar with it.
Thank you for answering that. LMSs can be a mystery to me, so that's very helpful.
Me as well.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments that you wanted to share? We've got just a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to, while we're waiting for any other questions to come in, I wanted to invite everyone to please join the MIOER network if you want to join our kind of community of practice. Don't have to be from Michigan, as this conference shows, to connect with Michigan folks in the world of open. And I also wanted to invite everyone to please feel free to join us for the conference wrap up that is going to be going on shortly at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be having a raffle with a couple of prizes to give away for anyone who is attending, and we all want to kind of catch up and say what we all learned and how much fun we all had and all that good stuff. So I'll leave this going for just a couple more moments in case anybody has anything else that they wanted to add. Otherwise, thank you so much, Alexis. Thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing what is certain to be a super valuable resource in the world of open. I'm so excited to see how that continues to develop and progress. And thank you for sharing with our conference today.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And everyone take care and enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of your week.